You're listening to a Zone Radio podcast, zoneradio.co.za.
Time for us to chat to Steve Reed. He's back in the studio. He comes in every second week. Of course, Steve is, I don't know if he is still or not still, but I'm going to say he's from False Bay College. Are you still from False Bay College?
Yes, I am.
Why do you look at your watch? Has that got something to do with it? It's like, are you running out of time today?
Huh? No, it's lots of time, particularly with you, Richard, and with our guest today.
All right. Before we go any further, let me tell you that you can WhatsApp questions to 072-447-8044, and we're going to be speaking to Dave Henderson, who is a fellow who knows a whole host about publishing books online, and that is your guest this afternoon. Hey, Steve?
Absolutely. So, Richard, thank you, and thank you, listeners. I interviewed Dave in October 2020. My word, I looked back on that and wrote a little article, Have You Got a Book Inside of You Just Waiting to Be Written? And maybe, listeners, maybe there's something that you've been working on and you're wondering how to get started or what's the next step, etc. So here's the man that I think will be an amazing resource to you. And I also got a lot of great information and support from him when I wrote the book that I did. I must say I found him to be both humorous and committed and dedicated, and even though he comes from Natal, we won't hold that against him. He says, I remember him starting out saying he's a Durban transplant, and so he started by, he's trying to embrace the wine culture and the freezing cold waters of Cape Town.
That's right. I still haven't got it right. But coming from Durban and then Joburg, it takes a bit of getting used to. With, I think the colder water for a start is quite a shock to the system.
They girls from Durban, man. And they can't take the cold. They can't take the cold. They can't play rugby either, but that's just me.
So, Dave, tell us a little bit about what do you do? Richard spoke about e-publishing, but it's actually broader than that, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
The company started off quite niche. So we started off focusing on very niche deliverables, like an ebook. And then what I quickly realized was if I wanted to grow a bigger business, that the niche part of the business was actually going to kill me. It's harder to actually earn an income and help people if you're offering such a small part of the whole process.
Okay.
And step by step, I essentially then added on bits and pieces to help the author. As the author said, hey, well, can you do a cover design? I quickly learned how to supply a cover. And when the author would ask, well, how does this book get online? How does it get published? I figured that out as well. And so I think you and I spoke about it. It was quite a fortuitous accident where I never meant to start the business. I was working full-time, different job, and essentially I had a little bit of a part-time passion, which I think is sometimes where the best business ideas start.
Yeah.
And I would work at night. After I got home from my full-time job, I'd work on helping authors get their books published.
You started with your dad, didn't you?
I did. So I think, I'm sure the listeners would agree, the important part when you're starting a side hustle is to make sure that you're passionate about it.
Yeah.
And so that was my first foot in the door, was helping my dad get his book published.
Okay.
Customer number one. Coincidentally, also one of the hardest customers I've had. And through the process, I fell in love with it. Through the process of figuring out how an ebook works, what it is, how do you sell it, and every other part of the process, I figured out that it was actually something I loved.
Yes.
And so without any formal qualifications in publishing, I stumbled accidentally into the business. That's been around 10 years, I think, since I started.
Is that so? So
2012.
2012, fantastic. And Dave, I've personally benefited from your insight and expertise. For example, listeners, I started out by selling my book online. And, I realized shortly after that in South Africa, in my particular case, most people prefer a book in their hand. So I switched to doing an actual book rather than an ebook, although they're the same thing. But I sold 30 or 40 books online, and I had no idea how I was going to actually benefit from that, because at that time you had to reach a certain number or value before you could get paid. Yeah. I just thought, oh well, I'm just going to leave it there. And it was last year or this year that you put that online. So maybe I don't want to go into that too much, but rather unpack a little bit more. Your business is a one-stop shop which offers all of the components and all of the things that a aspiring author would want. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely. So essentially the thinking behind it was anything an author might need, I want to help with. And so as the business built up, I figured out the various steps, the authors would be asking for help with, from the cover design through to getting the interior layout done, through to things like the ebook version and getting it published online. And with any new topic, anything that people are afraid of. So ebooks sound scary, right? They sound, what is an ebook? It's electronic. I've never used that before. How does it work? As with any topic where there's confusion, you have to build in a bit of education into the business, because the more educated your customers might be, the more you get to help them. And so as you pointed out, you found one of my helpful videos, one of the how-to videos on how South African authors get paid directly. You were speaking about the threshold where if you don't give banking details to Amazon, they want to post you a check, but only once you've made a certain amount of money will they post you a check. Sure. And being an author from Africa and South Africa has all these little hard things that we have to overcome that other authors from other countries in the world don't have to.
In Europe and America, etc.
In the first world countries, absolutely. There's just things and avenues people have access to that we don't.
Okay.
And so part of the thinking with the business was I actually want to educate people. Then I get to help them. Okay. And someone who's educated is a lot more fun to help.
Okay.
And so that ties into a love of the content that I create. In other words, a lot of the way a person would find me, an author might find me, is actually through the content that I put out there. And it's a little counterintuitive where you're putting out content that takes you a long time to create, to edit, to publish. But as South Africans who might be a little skeptical, it's something I think you'll appreciate. A lot of people are skeptical in South Africa about paying any money without actually seeing you and touching you and getting a blood sample from you. Now, how do you make people more comfortable with, partnering with you without having to meet you, especially where the service you're helping people with is digital. So you don't have to meet them. It's a nice to have, not a have to have. Well, now you have to think about how you structure the business, in this case, helping authors, in a way that makes someone feel comfortable. Sure. And again, going back to the content, people who find free content tend to like you and trust you a whole lot more. So there's a couple benefits of sharing freely, of putting the content out there.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, it happens to be quite a smart business move in the end as well.
Sure. So if you go to your website, the first face you see is your friendly face. Is that correct?
That's right. The first friendly face. That's right. Yeah.
And if I also remember correctly, you've got on a Super Euro insignia.
That's right. I think I'm Captain South Africa. And the rest of the team, I think we have Batman and we have Wonder Woman, and then we actually have a cuddly author companion that I got designed by a lady out here in Hout Bay, actually.
Oh, really?
I get handmade puppies that I give to my authors as part of the process.
Talk to us a little bit about, you've been, did you say 12 years or 10 years?
It's 10 years.
10 years. 10 years. How many authors would you say you've helped in that time?
Yeah, I can give quite a good number there. So since we started, we're getting to the point now, I think we're just under 400.
Okay.
So 395 with around 15 to 16 authors currently being helped by us.
Okay, super.
That's right, yeah. So it's grown in leaps and bounds, and having the team around me is pivotal to that. So you can't, you have to make the choice. When you start your side hustle, you have to make the choice. Am I going to be a freelancer, or will I build something bigger than just me?
Sure.
And that was something that I decided early on, that what I'm building, although I'm the face and many times I'll be the face, I want to build something that doesn't necessarily need me.
Sure.
And the way you build that is very different.
And
that's
people
right.
contract with the brand rather than only with
That's right.
Okay, wonderful. Some successes and some setbacks that you've experienced?
So I think the setbacks, anyone who runs a business is going to know the issues of cash flow.
Yeah.
I think running a business where you're not selling a product, where you're selling a service, it hurts like hell. Especially in a climate where money's tight, where it's very easy for an author to ask, well, I've got a cousin who designs covers, so why should I get your team to help me?
Right.
Or I don't need help with an edit because, again, my family
English,
edited
okay,
for me.
yeah.
You know, I studied English, and I could actually write a list of, I actually should write a list of the reasons I hear for people to avoid certain help.
Yeah.
And the thing is, that's where self-publishing your book gets a bit of a bad rap from.
Yeah.
Is because it's a self-funded process. It's understandable that author might want to save cash.
Yeah.
And so one of the first conversations I have with someone that I help is, what is your goal for writing?
Yeah.
Because if your goal is cathartic, maybe you're writing a story and no matter how many people might read that story, it was healthy for you to write.
Yeah.
Then the need for perfection on the publishing side is a little less. You know, the need for the perfect book cover, the need for the perfect editor to help you is a bit less. And so one of the conversations I'll have with every author that knocks on our door is, tell me a little more about why you're writing the book, because that then shapes the advice that I'll give you. So if you were writing as part of a business, you are writing a book as a business owner about your speciality and what you do in the business, all of a sudden now the need to be or have a polished book is a lot more important.
Yeah.
Because any mistakes that creep through or are left behind might reflect badly on your business.
Yeah. On the brand itself.
That's right.
Yeah. I went through that myself. I remember thinking to myself, I wonder why I need an editor. And I thought, okay, well, people say you should invest in that. So let me try this out. And I got hold of an editor whom I'll still recommend highly. And she edited, but not only were there, I'm sure there must have been grammatical mistakes, etc., but just the flow of the book, it just so much looked smarter, nicer. It just came together. I didn't get that. I thought, but my spelling and my grammar is pretty good.
Yeah.
Robert Kiyosaki said, whatever you do, make sure you invest in those services or products that will help you do what you do better. So he's not an estate agent. He's not a lawyer. He's not an accountant. But he says, I will find the best lawyer, the best accountant, and the best estate agent for the properties that I'm looking for. So Dave, that makes absolute sense.
That's right.
But you started by saying one of the setbacks is cash flow. Okay. And if you think about those, did you say nearly 400?
That's right. Almost
Nearly
500,
400. What would be, are you free to share a success there that we know that guy, or we know about that woman who wrote that book, whatever?
I've helped a lot of people, some well-known, others, and mostly people you wouldn't have heard of.
Okay.
A lot of authors from South Africa, just bear in mind the success people get often is out of country.
Okay.
So as South Africans, we tend to like certain kinds of books. We like the political, non-fiction books. But where does that leave authors who write other things, softer topics or maybe fiction?
Yeah.
And so a lot of authors actually find that success out the country, which is what a store like Amazon, for example, gives the author. It gives you that reach into a market that's different from yours. Because up until Amazon opened its doors almost a decade ago, a lot of writers of fiction felt underappreciated. In fact, a lot of authors in general felt underappreciated in South Africa, because if you weren't getting books sold from a local bookstore, who told you, that they were enjoying your book?
Yeah.
And that's what the beauty of the online mechanism is that you can now connect with readers and you get that validation loop, which was missing before. You get to know that you changed someone's life. And so my measurement of success is really helping people achieve what they need to. Because bear in mind, a book is a message. And so there are different formats. There's different packages for your message. You could have an audiobook, a hardcover, a paperback, an ebook. But for those authors who believe in their message, that's what going online helps you to achieve. It helps you to reach readers with less obstacles, essentially, at a much lower cost point than we've ever had before. And so when I find someone who truly believes in their message and I'm able to give them that leverage, that mechanism to find and help new people, it's a good feeling. It's a really good feeling. Sure. I think in South Africa, we appreciate good service. I think as South Africans, we're so used to getting cuck service that it's amazing when you find companies who are able to hold your hand through a process. And so that's what we try to do. We try hold an author's hand. And the tricky part is trying to stay profitable while you're doing that. Because I think you can disagree with me here, but I think as South Africans, we have a bit of we demonize profit without meaning to. I think profit becomes a bad thing. How could you? How could your prices be higher? Why do you charge what you charge? And so the ability to make a profit while doing something that you believe in and helping people with whatever your measurement might be, that's a truly good South African story, I think.
Sure. Lovely. Dave, talk to us a little bit about if there are listeners out there who they're thinking about writing, or they've written, or they're wondering about publishing, etc. What do they do? How do they start? Can you give a little bit of guidance on that for our listeners?
I'd love to. So let's ignore ebooks for now, because people hear ebooks and they automatically think unicorns and rainbows. Ebooks are not magical. So ebooks are a way to package your content, but it won't necessarily change how the whole process works. For example, so the first decision you would have to make if you're listening to this and wondering, should I go forward with the book, the book idea that I have, is what's your reason for writing? As I mentioned, it might not matter if you sell a single copy, or it might be a valid income stream that you're looking to make money from. It might be linked to a business that you're currently involved in, or it might be completely different, where you're writing this one book that's unrelated, and that's where it's going to end. So the writer who has a career path in mind the advice I give is very different to someone who's writing once off, or where the writing was a cathartic process.
Okay.
Obviously, self-publishing is not for sissies. You're going to be faced with invoices and with costs that you did not expect, especially, as you touched on, is editing. Editing is a per-word cost that surprises a lot of authors. And likewise, kids' books, where an author comes with an idea for a kids' book. Kids' books, they can be the cheapest books you do, but with the illustrations and layout of those illustrations, they can also be the most expensive books you do. So give some thought, if you're listening to this, as to what route you want to follow. Do you want to go the traditional route and knock on a big publisher's door and say, I'm a first-time author, would you help me? I think you can guess what they might be thinking when this person knocks on the door. Are you a viable business choice? Do you bring a following with you? What background and what clout do you carry online? And that's why traditional publishing, the risk of going to someone like a big publisher is, how much time are you willing to waste waiting for the answer and possibly for the rejection? Now, for those people who have a certain personality type, who want to be in control, or perhaps your timelines, you want to get something out there fairly soon, let's say within a few months, as opposed to waiting the 12 to 18 months that a publisher might take to get back to you. Well, welcome to self-publishing. And so the biggest ingredient to success is firstly doing your homework. There's a lot of resources online. For example, our website, where I do my best to educate you, because the people that have the most fun in the process are the people that kind of know what to expect. Again, it's not magic. The fact that it's digital doesn't change it. The way people find books, for example, is word of mouth. And therefore, what are you as the author doing? And I'm sure you could answer this, Steve. What are you doing to help people find your book? How are you integrating the fact that you've written this book into your everyday life? How are you letting people know? And a lot of authors go into this unsuspecting, thinking that because it's online, the money magically happens. And so that's why I spend a lot of my time almost like a counselor for Lifeline, where I'm chatting with authors going, okay, before you jump into this publishing thing, here's what to expect. Let's chat about your marketing ideas. Let's chat about what you do good. Because as you pointed out, the author's core function, what do you think an author should be doing? Let's assume that it's the average author who doesn't have graphic design or editing skills. If an author had one job to focus on, it would be
producing the
the
what
content,
they want.
focusing on the content, and getting a team on board who can then guide you through the rest of the process, assuming self-publishing is what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. As you pointed out, do what you're good at. Do what you are good at with the writing. Get the people around you to then guide you through the process. And yeah, so I spend my days almost counseling authors through the various stages of grief. From I want to write a book to I've written a book, but no one's buying it, or I got a bad comment. It's another conversation where there's often tears.
Okay.
And so there's there's the highest of highs, and there's the lowest of lows, and I think I'm very aware of that. I never want to exaggerate to authors about how tough the journey of self-publishing can be, but for the people who prepare, the people who believe in their message, the world is your oyster.
Fantastic. And I think that's a good place to pause and just ask Richard if we've had any queries online.
Nothing's come through on the WhatsApp. I do have a question though. What does this cost? Okay, so we've heard a lot about how the process goes on and what you can do, and it's brilliant. But for somebody listening right now, they got a book within them and they're thinking to themselves, well, I want to do this. What's a ballpark figure?
Okay. So one of the questions that helps figure that out is what formats the author wants. So an author who says, I want just a digital, or I want a digital in print, or I want an audiobook. Okay, different price points straight away. Again, the authors who need services like editing. So what I normally do to save sanity is I separate editing out the packages that we help authors with, because editing of 5,000 words or 100,000 words, obviously different ball game. So an author who comes to us and says, my book is actually ready, I just need help with the ebook side of things. That could be a process of 5 to 10,000 rand.
Okay.
To get the ebook created, to get your cover tweaked for the ebook and published to Amazon, 5 to 10,000 rand is an easy number to work with. Those authors who say, listen, I don't know what to do. I've got nothing. I've got a Word document. Guide me through everything I need. We have packages put together that guides the authors through 6 or 7 steps, depending. And on the other side of that process, they would have a book on Amazon selling copies. And those processes, those packages, cost from around 10,000 upwards, depending on what formats the author wants on the other side.
Obviously going to print is more expensive because that's a whole different cost structure.
Yes and no, actually. So sorry to hop in there, but the beauty of the options you have as an author is that, bear in mind, once your book, okay, so obviously ebook sells as many times as it can, but paperback can actually do the same thing, where once your paperback is designed and you have physically a PDF of the cover and interior, a shop like Amazon can print copies unlimited amounts of times. So when you give those 2 files to Amazon in the spec they want, Amazon will print and ship copies without you lifting a finger, known as print on demand. And there are companies locally like Takealot who can do something similar. So basically what it means, there's upfront cost to get your book designed, but it can sell as many times as it can after that.
Question here, do you work with bloggers as well?
So do I work with bloggers? People with blogs often come looking for a book. I mean, Steve is actually quite a good example here, where he had a lot of short form content and they said, I want to stitch together in a book. So I'm assuming that's what
No, I think the person here is asking specifically if they wanted to launch a blog, would you be able to help them do
It's
that?
very interesting. So when I started...
Okay, so there's a new division right there. Okay.
When I started the business, I actually I went through that process of creating what became an award-winning blog, earning income off the blog. It's a very separate conversation because writing for a blog is so different from writing for a book. The writing for a blog has to be SEO focused. It has to be short-form content. Writing for a book, you have someone's attention for a lot longer. And so the bottom line that ties everything together, though, is the person writing must love what they do. So writing as a blog as a business decision is not necessarily a great one. Likewise for a book, you're not writing a book to necessarily get rich. But if it's something you believe in and love writing about, again, it opens up doors. So I've been able, as an example, to earn income off my blog once it got busy enough, and I allowed Google inside the blog to put targeted ads up at the visitors. I was able to earn income off that blog, getting to 1,000 or 2,000 rand a month at some points.
Now, you've done that successfully.
Yes.
Can you help somebody else? That's the question. Or is it not part of your business?
It's not part of the business.
Okay.
I'm very passionate about it, but not part of the My eBook business.
Okay, so that's the answer, Judy. There we go. And I have 2 books I want to write.
Okay.
Yeah. One is called Unusual Band Names.
All right.
Yeah, I'd love to know the story of a flock of seagulls or Toad the Wet Sprocket. There's some incredible band names, and I'd love to write a book about that.
Sure.
But unusual band names. The other one is called 101 Ways to Piss Off a Unicorn. That book I'm going to write. Because
like that
that is going to have things like the glue on the toilet paper roll must be the strongest glue known to man. Okay? Because you just about have to rip the entire roll apart just to get that little strip loose. And things like speed traps on the downhill. Why? We need to write
They
these.
do feel quite devious, don't they?
Yeah, and things like my pet hate is this molded packaging. You've just about hospitalized yourself, cut yourself to pieces. If you're somebody like me who's on blood thinning medication, you could die just trying to get something out of that molded packages.
Yeah.
There are 101 things like that piss me off. And I'm going to write that book, 101 Ways to Piss Off a Unicorn. Call centers. Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Sure.
So, I'm listening to what you're saying there. And it is something that, as an author, you need to have a passion for what you're doing. And if you're not, if you get, and you lose that passion if you put it at risk because you're trying to do all the other things.
Yeah.
And then you get frustrated and you get depressed and you lose what it is that you set out, the excitement of
That's
that
right.
journey. And if there's somebody like yourself who's able to help people through that and still keep them having fun, I think it's a good formula.
That's right. Writing can be quite an art form. And as an example, I write in a way that I don't care if not a single person reads it. Part of my enjoyment of the writing process is the writing itself. And so when I started blogging, I blogged for maybe 12 months before I actually got the first comment. And so I think if you're someone who loves the writing process, then jump straight in. And if you're someone who maybe has a full-time business and you're writing, in the evenings, then you could always hire someone to actually help you with that process. There are simpler ways to get your message out there and packaged. For example, hiring a ghostwriter could help. Or my personal favorite is actually speaking and then recording and having it transcribed.
Yeah.
So for those busy people, there are simpler ways to capture and record your content if you weren't into, spending many hours behind a computer writing.
I think that what you're offering people is a wonderful thing, and I think you should make a profit from it. And well done to you. It was great having you in here this afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dave. It's wonderful.
It's been great, guys. Thanks a lot.
I think, it was Steve Jobs, I think, who said, don't die with music inside of you. Don't die with a book that's still inside of you as well.
Completely agree. Thanks, Steve.